Ever think there must be some nefarious forces working against you? Otherwise, saving and investing for retirement wouldn't be so damn hard.
Absolutely. You are not imagining it. There are some pretty nefarious forces working against you and your best interest when it comes to saving and investing for retirement.
This is Queer Money episode number 543, and today we're sharing part one of a two-parter on just some of the reasons why it's so damn hard to save for retirement. Now, on with the show. With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One, N.A., member FDIC. So just by looking at the news and the current data that's come out about Americans' ability to save for retirement, or success or lack thereof of saving for retirement, you would think that humans suck at squirreling our nuts away for a rainy day.
Yes. He said,
But
listen to how he said we suck at saving nuts.
but Homo sapiens, including homosexual Homo sapiens, have existed for like 270,000 years or something like that. And so we must be good to some degree at saving our nuts. Otherwise, we wouldn't have existed for so long.
Right.
So
Yeah.
today we're going to talk about some of the systemic reasons, those nefarious forces working against us, for why saving and investing for retirement is so damn hard.
Yeah. And I would say probably the first one we're going to talk about, I think a lot of people immediately blame capitalism. And I think that the corporate side of capitalism is to a large degree responsible because they have basically said, pocket aces to all you who want to live a safe and comfortable retirement. They basically have shirked their responsibility all the way back in the mid to late 70s when the 401k became a thing. Companies were like, oh, well, we don't need to save for your pensions anymore. You can do it yourself.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the responsibility for saving for a retirement shifted from corporations to individuals, and corporations have done a horrible job helping people keep up with that.
Well, and part of the problem with that is that then that all of a sudden gave Wall Street more of a reason to focus mostly on itself and shareholder value and screw everybody else within the economic system, which is literally every human. But unless you're like working on Wall Street or you're at the top level of those executive positions, you're not necessarily benefiting from this transition from pensions to 401ks the way that the top 1% are.
Yeah, and literally the amount of money that companies would set aside for pensions is vastly larger than what they have been setting aside for 401ks.
Huge.
A lot of companies now, it's 2, 3, 4% of employees' salaries. And in the past, it was a lot more than that. And that's why Teresa Ghilarducci, who was on the Queer Money podcast back on episode 512, basically said that the 401k experiment hasn't worked. And Gen X has basically been the guinea pigs who have been taking it up the when it comes to planning and being prepared for retirement.
I thought it was only millennials who struggled.
Oh, yes.
All right. So the second reason for why it's there, the second systemic reason for why it's harder to save for retirement is that the rising cost of living. I mean, obviously, right now we're talking a lot about inflation, even though at the current moment it's appearing to be tamed. And I know that the Republicans would have us believe that inflation only started when Joe Biden became president of the United States. But if you look at the CPI report going all the way back to as far back as you can look, we've seen an exponential increase in the cost of healthcare, education, housing, all that kind of stuff,
Right.
pretty much since 2000. And there has not been a proportional increase in wages.
Right.
Healthcare costs since 2000 have increased over 100% or nearly 100%. Housing increased over 50%. Education has increased around 80%. But wages for average household income has only increased about 27%. So, it's just harder to save for the long term when you're struggling to live in the near term. And I don't think that it's something that's getting a lot of discussion because, as we talked about with Paul Donovan when he was on the podcast, there's this wealth illusion that's created because we have more access to credit, and that kind of sort of gives corporations more of an opportunity to shirk the responsibility and keep having wages keep up with inflation because we all have available credit cards.
Yeah, well, we have access to money, not necessarily money that we have earned yet, but we have access to money, and then we go spend that money, and then we're stuck in that loop of slowly paying it back, and more of the money that we earn is being sucked away to banks through credit, and that's money that we could have been putting aside for
The future.
retirement.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The mission of Queer Money is to financially empower the LGBTQ plus community. Join us in thanking Capital One for supporting that mission. Number 3 thing here is specifically that point that John was talking about. Inflation and wages have not been in alignment. Wages have been stagnant for decades, and we go all the way back to the 70s, and we hear about this, I think, especially when we think about when corporations and the wealthy started getting all sorts of tax breaks under Reagan. There were a lot of reasons why corporations then no longer wanted to pass that money that they were giving to employees as a way to stimulate the economy. They could just pass that through to themselves in the form of either dividends, or the corporations were just giving a certain level of employees more and more wages. As a matter of fact, CEO wages right now, the average CEO in the S&P 500 earns 268 times what the average worker earns.
Yeah, there's
No
just
wonder
no
they
way that you can justify that.
and no wonder they don't think that there's any problem with people being able to afford shit, because they can afford everything that
Right.
everything that they would want. Yachts that $100 million yachts they can go buy, right? But the rest of us are dealing with the fact that hourly wages have not kept up. As a fact, matter of fact, if you go back to the late 70s all the way through to 2021, productivity, employees were producing 62.7% more, but our wages have only gone up by 17.3%.
Right.
So corporations have just continued
Siphon more and
to
more off,
siphon more of that
going
money off.
more to shareholder value. And then the fourth reason here is historically low interest rates, which simply make it harder to save. I know that we're talking a lot about high interest rates because suddenly people can't afford to buy homes, and that seems to be the only adverse consequence that some people seem to see with the interest rates being higher. But there's two sides to every coin, and when you have these artificially low interest rates, it's just simply harder to save. Right, putting money in a savings account makes no sense because you can't keep up with the cost of living, so your dollar becomes weaker as time goes on. So these are just four of the reasons for why it's harder systematically. There are systems in place that make it harder to save for retirement, make it harder to invest for retirement. There are obviously more that we could dive into, but we're trying to keep these episodes pretty succinct.
Yeah. So let's go just quickly. Those 4 reasons are: corporations have been shirking their responsibility to help employees save for retirement. The cost of living continues to go up dramatically. Inflation adjusted wages have not kept up with the cost of living, and low interest rates has prevented or discouraged people from actually saving for retirement. But as John mentioned, not all of the reasons why we as a community are not saving for retirement are systemic issues. Some of those issues lie with us, and we'll share a little bit about that next week.
And again, we're trying to keep this series more of a dialogue than a presentation. So let us know in the direct messages, email info@queermoneypodcast.com, or comment wherever you happen to be listening to or watching this particular episode. Answer this question for us. What external forces are making it harder for you in particular to save or invest for retirement? We'll cover those in a future episode.
Capital One Auto Navigator does more than just auto financing. We're here to help you find a car you love, too. Shop millions of cars from thousands of dealers nationwide. Research your favorite makes and models. Explore dealers near you and more. All on Auto Navigator.
Thanks for joining us for another episode. Come back next Thursday when we continue to help you have a fabulous retirement.
Bye.